Positive. We're about to find it. Nice.
It does start.
Beautiful.
This is SeerNova Podcast episode 4, season 2, because it's a revamp.
Season 2, episode 4, right?
Nah.
Starts with the small number. It's like what are we, a date? You know, like month, day, year? We're just like
my manager has to call me as I start my podcast.
Who's calling? Who's that? Tell him to go away. Cool.
Yeah. So we have Ray. I'm gonna butcher your name, even though it's not that long. Jamison. Yep.
Jamison. Jam is on, all one word. There's no E in it. A lot of people try to put an E in my last name, but no E.
Jamison? Did you say Jamison?
Jamison.
Just Jamison, but
just Jamison, just without the E. Gotcha.
No E. Some people always ask how to spell it. I say Jam is on, all one word, and they have no problem.
Oh,
if I say no E, then they stutter and they mess.
Gotcha. You were just spelling it. Jam is on. Yeah. The jam is on. It sounded like it was.
Yeah, that's right.
Going on.
A slap de bass. The jam is on.
Perfect.
Okay.
Awesome. So, yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself. Give yourself an introduction to anybody who has no idea who you are or what DM means.
Right on. So DM is just short for Dungeon Master. I play a lot of D&D. I've been doing it for over 10 years. I kind of started late to the game. I was born in the mid-'80s. I am not quite Gen X, so I am a millennial. I'm one of the early ones. Next February, I'll be 41. It was a very cool time to be born right in the middle of that era, because that was the big combination where toy companies, cartoon companies, comics decided, why don't we combine our efforts and make more profit? And the kids are going to love it. So Masters of the Universe, Transformers, He-Man, Spider-Man and his amazing friends, Brave Star, and the list goes on and on. I'm sure I could tell by the way you guys are smiling, I'm scratching your itch, metaphorically speaking.
Yeah.
So I have an older brother. He's almost 5 years older than me. So him born in the late 70s. He was all about these cartoons. I always saw the reruns and I always saw his toys. I never saw them fresh out of the package. The first time in the recesses of my mind, the earliest toys I can remember opening up is 1989's Batman. In that Christmas after the summer, Batman with the utility belt that connected. It was also a battering ram and zipped back in. Joker's face who changed color. That's the earliest of my memories of 80s toys, which is right on the tail end. Also, the Batmobile that had shields, which was just a plastic dome that fit over top. That was a really cool era to live through, even though I was kind of at the tail end of it. Yeah. My brother loved comic books. His favorite one was Incredible Hulk. He liked the idea of a little guy that got angry and turned big and completely tilted the table the other way. And I was right alongside with him watching all of these different cartoons, if it was on TV or if we'd find something old at a video rental store. 1960 Spider-Man. I remember that very first episode, which is a direct reflection of Spider-Man's origins. And I remember that really sitting on me, that if you could do something good and you don't, and the bad thing happens. I know this was reworded in Civil War, but if you don't fix a problem and the bad thing happens, it's your fault. And that had a real impact on me. And I got drawn right into all of those elements of storytelling, be it heroes. Eventually, when I left my adolescence and entered my 20s, I had to move cross country up here in Canada. And I left everything, family, friends, and eventually liking Lord of the Rings a lot and getting into medieval fantasy a little bit. I suggested to my friends, in order to find an excuse to hang out via webcam, let's play some D&D. I've never played before, and I just decided, you know what, I'll be Dungeon Master. How hard could it be? I don't think I bit off more than I could chew, but I definitely chewed a lot, we'll put it that way. It was a lot of learning curves, and after a while, you learn less is more in regards to preparation and being reactive, and there's a whole, it's an art. It truly is an art, and it's really awesome. The very first campaign I ran, I made it homebrew. If it wasn't more complicated enough, I did all of the lore, all of the characters. There's no modules. In my mind, I thought the modules would make things more constraining for me. It was more for me to memorize that wasn't already in my head. So out of all of this, over a decade, I made this world, all of this lore, this history, these characters, different settlements, and my friends helped sculpt that as we went. And I've always wanted to make a comic book, and I decided to just take the plunge and express this story of this campaign I've been running for literally years. The only difference is I took out the players' characters and I made my own characters based off of the players, ironically. But in a nutshell, I've got a 3-issue campaign currently running. The first issue was funded on Kickstarter last April. Issue number 2 is coming out in the new year. I've got some really nice talent attached to it. I'm very excited. This entire 3-issue miniseries, it takes place over the course of one night, and it's just about 4 friends that run into basically an undead outbreak. They're able to stave it off. They're not the mightiest of individuals in the land. In fact, 3 of them almost get killed off in the first issue, and almost like a mature version of a Scooby-Doo Mysteries, if you will, they start to make a connection that the undead outbreak has something to do with a local drug problem, and they start peeling back the onion, as they say. So this second issue, the stakes raise up, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I wish I could just talk all about it. Unfortunately, I can't. But I'm very, very excited to finally release this to the world.
Very awesome.
Yeah.
I got a question. The Kickstarter page is Philbo Publishing.
Yes, shout out to Phil Russert, Philbo Publishing.
Gotcha. Okay, I was curious because I was wondering if that was you or you were under somebody else's. You were going through a Philbo Publishing. That's a fun name.
Yeah, he took a chance on me. I'm very, very grateful. I just talking to the talent and getting talent to work with me, and then building a little network. It's a really nice supportive community being part of this and doing my little portion of just contributing to it. Not a big portion, but I'm happy to do what I do on my side.
Very cool. Nice. Well, that was a great intro. Not everybody is able to sell themselves and talk about a lot about themselves. They're like, I really liked comics when I was a kid, and I started making comics, and now I make comics. So that's definitely very cool. I love the 80s toys nostalgia too. The what's it called? I remember getting these Street Sharks that were like this. There was Ripster. I think Ripster was the main character. No, I'm trying to remember.
Is that the one where the head detaches from the toy? Like it's like a launch.
No,
that's
not
the hammerhead.
toy. No, that's the hammerhead. I can't remember the name. He was like Jab or something like that, or Jab. I think he was Jab. Ripster, I think, was the tiger shark. Who was the great white shark?
I know them visually.
No, he is Ripster. Never mind, he is Ripster because Streets was the guy who's the tiger shark. But anyways,
gotcha.
I had this big stuffed animal of Ripster, the great white shark, and you could put your hands in the back of his head, and the mouth had hard plastic in the stuffed animal, so you could open the mouth and stuff.
Cool. You know what? As you described that, I'm starting to remember that like a commercial.
Oh, yeah, it was awesome.
I wasn't huge into Street Sharks, but much like anybody born in the mid '80s, Ninja Turtles just swallowed my soul for a decade.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I had tons of Ninja Turtle stuff too. Yeah, it's just, and I know Greg's a huge TMNT fan, but it was just I remember watching I think it's on the Discovery Channel, like the Toys That Built America or something. It was not that, but something like that. And yeah, it was so awesome watching some of the stuff, like even the Slinky, how the guy accidentally made it, he knocked a spring off of his desk. He's like, that's interesting. I wonder if I can make a repeat of that. And eventually it looked really cool. And he's like, kids are going to love it. And no one would buy it. And then it became one of the biggest sensations ever. So
yeah, it's an icon now.
Yeah, I love that stuff because it is kind of like those toys, like you said, like how all of these different creative industries kind of banded together to start like selling like crazy. And I think that's interesting how independent creators, independent comic creators now, when they run Kickstarter, they basically have to do that. They have to make toys, they have to make pins, they got to make all these other things other than the comic to make it so that people can support them. And the way I look at
add-ons definitely help.
Yeah, 100%. Because like some people are willing to give you more money, but not for nothing. Like they're like, I'd love to support you, but I'm not just going to give you like $800. Like, you know, I want to give you money for things, but even if it's more than what you're paying, so that I can support you. So that's why we know like there's this one guy who collects pins. So like now we got to create pins, and it's like, you know, if somebody likes cards, like playing cards or art, whatever it is, whatever your community enjoys, like it's always good to offer all of that other stuff. So we kind of emulate the 80s on Kickstarter by like trying to create as much as we can. Even the trailers, like we create video trailers for our comic. We don't even have a video of the comic. It's just we have to create one just so that it has all these different forms of media. So I definitely love that that throwback to the 80s, because 100% like that was like a huge deal. That big collaboration between all the media types, and just which is, it's funny because that's now why there's so many laws against targeting kids with ads, is because of that. It was so effective. Kids were going crazy there, like, and parents are like, this is enough. We need to put some restrictions on there.
I remember in an interview with Shaquille O'Neal, he said that if we had social media back when we were in our prime in basketball, we'd be billionaires by now. Oh, like it's funny, all the tactics of the 80s. Imagine that plus social media. Like, oh my goodness! Yeah, imagine the chaos of dollars that would have floated
out. Yeah, so no, that's pretty. That was a fun trip down memory lane. But yeah, so we've got some questions for you today. I know we sent you some other questions earlier, and then we changed them up last second just to give you a curveball. But
I can answer them all, no problem.
Seems like you're good on your toes. So Greg, what do we got? What's the first question we got?
How does tabletop gaming influence your comic storytelling?
So, and the best way to answer that, if I assume you fellas read Wizard magazine back in the day.
I know of it, but
you know of it. Okay, so Wizard magazine, in its last handful of years, it one of the biggest stories at the time was Marvel's original Civil War. And speaking to some of the writers, Bendis and others, I forget which one, I think it was the editor actually, there was so much going on that in order to track all of the characters at all times, they actually used Post-it notes on a wall and would group them at this part of the story. These characters would be here. So little details like artists drawing characters that would be in that area, but not that important in this specific issue of this specific character. You might see them in the background, but you're always going to have those hardcore fans that are like, that person in the background of panel 3 shouldn't be there. Like that kind of stuff. For me personally, I use an online D&D platform called Roll20, and I made a platform just I could see it, or sorry, a campaign only I could see it. I drew out all the maps and I put all the characters in places. So as I wrote the story out, this would happen next. I would move them accordingly. And I found that actually very beneficial, because I'm sure everybody who's ever written a story, if you put something away for a week and come back, okay, now where was I? I'm sure everybody has started writing sentences, and you know what? I either over-explain this, I've explained this already, or I'm missing a part and the reader's going to lose, or I'm going to lose the reader. I got to go back and blend this nicer. So physical totems, we'll call them, props, if you will, was very, very useful for me in regards to making sure the story flowed very nicely.
So you kind of used the game to track the story writing, not the other way around. So you didn't like play a game and then create a story. You were creating a story and then going, okay, if that's going to happen here, like I need to make sure the plot's progressing towards whatever end game there is. And you're using the game as like just a tracking tool, along with probably a semi-editor to go, oh, I already went that route, I need to go this route.
Yes, within reason. Now, the first time we ever played these games, I obviously we were not thinking tracking a story. We were thinking of just playing out a story. But to come back and relive it, I needed these, like you were saying, I needed these physical elements to remind myself the finer details of what the heck was going on during the story. And in some cases, I found it very helpful because there were at times there was glaring details that just didn't fit well, or spaces that needed to be filled in. So those physical representations I found were the most helpful for me personally.
I love that because when so Greg writes all of our comics and I edit most of them. Sometimes we get other editors, but whenever I'm editing, one of the big things I'm looking for is when there's like this jump in the plot where like all of a sudden like something's where it needs to be, but I have no idea why.
You need a MacGuffin, as they say.
Yeah, it's like so what ended up happening was I'd have to look at it and I go, why are all three of these characters here? And he goes, oh, because they need to be. And it's like, so, okay, but why are they here? Right? Because if there's no reason for them to be here and it's just for the plot, it like will disconnect the reader. And so that was something where one issue in particular, it was really aggressive where like these three completely unrelated people all end up in a really weird location. And I'm like, all right, we need a real reason they're all here. And so like one of our characters blew up and fell into a sewer that was filled with chemicals and he got washed down a river. And we're like, oh, okay. So he ends up there because he's washed down the river and hits the bank near the location. Okay, that guy's there. The other people we already knew. The main reason that we're even at this place, there's like a guns deal going off, right? So that's why these guys are here. But why is the third guy there? And it's like, oh, he actually caused a problem earlier, and then he's meeting with somebody who happens to live in the area. Now we have a reason for all three of the people to be there, as opposed to like they all just showed up. So like it's I'd imagine putting that on a game board would be so much easier to go like, this person's way over here. They need to be here. Like we can't just
what would funnel them that way kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. We have to like, and that's what happened.
It has to feel natural, even though this ragtag group is together. There has to be a natural reason for them to all come together. One time I did a one-shot campaign, and every single individual that was playing, they were all politicians, and there was a war that was on their nation's doorstep, and they had to decide. They had an artifact that was going to help defend their land. They had to decide where the artifact should be placed in their territory. All six of them were part of different political parties. So there was three of the members were in one political party. That was half the group. They needed 4 out of 6 majority vote. There was another political party that consisted of 2, and then 1 individual in their own political party. They were all sealed off by the king and queen in an area, and somehow assassins got in. The assassins are killed off, and it appears that they were hired based off of their belongings by the largest political party. So what all of them didn't know about each other is they were all warlocks of different patrons, and the chaos just went crazy. But for me I want a bunch of warlocks to fight each other. Okay, well, let's make them all politicians. Okay, it makes sense why this is going to happen now. And at the end of the day, it turned into a 2, instead of a 1-shot, a 2-shot. It was 2 meetings. And all I did was set the premise. The rest of it, ironically, was just like only combat. But it was very entertaining to just watch these guys like cannibalize themselves. It was a good time.
That's awesome. Cool. What's the next question, Greg?
What's a fan favorite comic moment inspired by gaming?
Are you able to share? There's 2 videos. Are you able to share one of the videos?
Yeah,
there's one that was a trailer, and then there's one that's a scene in the first issue. That scene, that would be a good segue to answering your question.
I think this one.
That's the one.
This one? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Let's see here.
Would you be able to tell me where you were going to pick up this fresh stuff?
No way, man.
You could save many lives here.
I'd rather die.
Oi! Death is a privilege which you will not be getting today.
Are you crazy?
Go for a walk. I can't tell everything our large friend is about to deal out to you. Let's talk to your friend here. Talk to me.
The dwarf! The dwarf!
Very cool.
I had to change my angle here. My device is saying that's overheating in the sun. But
Oh
I've got
yeah.
an ice drink. I'm just gonna put it in the shade and rest it against my ice drink. We should be fine. Perfect. All right.
Very cool. And so I'm assuming that's the moment. What inspired that?
What inspired that is I got a couple of friends that not always, but they believe staying within the
Oh.
You probably overheated.
Yeah.
Oh, but by the way, I was looking up that Wizard magazine. Yeah, I
Mhm.
had no idea that was a thing. The last
Really?
issue was in 2011, and it was first published in 1991.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to do a magazine that's kind of like that.
Do
a
you know
while
what the
ago.
final issue was, which is kind of funny? It was the Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern.
Oh, really?
Imagine
Like,
that.
oh, this is just
That's what
today.
shut it down. I used to get like Game Informant, and what was the other thing? It was Game Informant and something else. But those are like the main ones that I had. But no, that that's kind of funny. Yeah, shoot him a message, by the way. But yeah, I would say, where's my screen share here? Present, share screen, this window. Yeah, see?
Oh.
Yeah, the final issue, cover of 235. Train. But yeah, you were saying you wanted to create something like this?
Yeah, like a couple years ago, that Indie Revolution thing, I wanted to do like a magazine like that, but like apparently there's already one indie related that is already
It's whoever
out.
does it best. So if we ever do want to do, we can definitely do
Yeah,
it.
we can still
It's
do
funny
that.
too, by the way. I actually wanted to create one of these for the music business. We already have a name for it. We've even written articles for it. We just don't have the time to like develop it out.
Yeah, 'cause a lot of people like the idea, but then some people commented saying, "Yeah, like ICC, that's already a thing." I was like, "Oh, well, is it good?" Because like I didn't know that existed.
Yeah. And then these guys here, yeah. That's why I asked about the Philbo Publishing while he's gone too. Like looking at this is like their website,
Mhm.
and then I noticed they had Creator Con event. Oh, and then this came up.
Oh, yeah, he does.
Suffolk County Comic and Art Expo and Creator Con will return. Stay tuned for announcements.
I think Ian's been to that. Miller.
It looks like it's been. They probably stopped it. I wonder if they did it during like they stopped because of COVID or something. I don't know because it says it'll return, but with no extra information.
Oh,
Yeah. They on Facebook? Maybe they had events on Facebook. That'd be helpful.
they're on Facebook. I'm friends with him on Facebook.
And then where's events? About mention review followers. I don't see events. So if he did do events, he didn't put them on Facebook. He should put them on Facebook though. Publisher, Bayport, New York.
There he is.
My phone had a conniption. Apologies.
Yeah.
Did it overheat, by the way?
It was overheating. It said closing all apps due to overheating.
Yeah.
I went and parked in the shade, and I took the case off, and I put my iced drink against it, and that seemed to.
It's like, and then I threw it in the ice drink.
My MacGyvering seemed to fix the solution, or was the solution. Okay,
cool.
so
we were just to chat about the Wizard magazine and how we were talking about one day we want to create something like that. I didn't realize their last issue was in 2011, and
yeah, with Hal Jordan on the front, Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah, it was hilarious. I was looking at it. I was like, oh, I'm like, no wonder. I'm like, that's probably what ended it.
Oh, that's so like, and not a good way. That's so poetic. That's the last cover.
Yeah, it's like,
Wizard magazine that started right with Image Comics. They were right shoulder to shoulder. So
1991. I didn't realize that. So that was right when Greg and I are both 91 babies. So
oh, you're both born 91. I'm
Yep.
84 guy. Yeah, Wizard magazine I remember you can't buy every issue. You can't buy every comic book as a kid. I mean, eventually you get allowance and stuff, but even then, that's not going to cover everything. But one thing I made sure to always have was Wizard Magazine, because it at least would talk about the things of old and the things of current. So, I mean, Image Comics was huge at the time. So Image Comics would, there was always stuff about Image, but they would talk about The Dark Knight Returns with Frank Miller. They would just talk about it because it was great. And they would talk about old stories. And I got a lot of my history before me through Wizard. I would learn about Secret Wars and learn about the origin of the symbiote, not just Venom is cool, throw a symbiote on everything. It was really neat to have that magazine to help me catch up to all of the lore leading up to when I jumped into this stuff.
Yeah, it's fun. I'm trying to remember if I ever saw Wizard Magazine, but because my intro to comics was my dad liked comic books. We only had like a couple, and I didn't even really know he had them until later. But when I was a kid, I used to go to this barber like every other week because I used to keep my hair a lot shorter than this, and I used to get my hair cut all the time. And this barber, he had this bookshelf, and on the top, so he had books on the bottom, but on the top, it was covered in comic books. And every week he'd put different comics there, like it's probably a collection of comics. And so I used to read comics from all over the place. They could have been newer ones and older ones. So I just kind of got this random sampling.
All out of context. That's always fun sometimes.
I randomly, like looked this stuff up later when like fan Wikipedia pages came up. I remember that was like a huge thing. I used to just read through those. So like I learned about all the lore through Wikipedia, ironically, or not Wikipedia, but like the fan wikis. I think what do they call wiki fandoms? Yeah, the fandoms.
Yes.
And so that was like how I got my Wizard magazine. And it was just like getting all of those. And then you just go down rabbit holes where it mentions the characters in someone's bio. So you click on that, then you read that character's whole thing.
Yes.
And I think the other big one was the Spider-Man game for PlayStation 1. I remember when you would unlock characters unlock skins. Eventually they're like Spider-Man 2099. I'm like, what the heck is this? So I go,
who the heck's Cosmic Spider-Man? Like, what is
and you're like, holy crap, he doesn't eat or sleep because he absorbs cosmic radiation and is technically like the most powerful creature in all of the Marvel universe at that moment in time. He literally
this baghead man.
yeah, it was crazy. I still remember what was it? Tony Hawk Pro Skater. There was like a special character you can get with Spider-Man.
His Spider-Man, yes.
That special move was kicking off the board and
then hitting the wine and then pulling it back. Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was great.
I love the old PlayStation games. But and actually I think I just saw something that like Tony Hawk Pro Skater, I think the first one is like 25 years old now. I'm like, holy crap.
They might be making
99. That sounds about right. 1999. Yep. That first Spider-Man on PlayStation, that came out in 2000. So we're almost there.
That stuff.
We're almost there. 25 years.
Yeah, so that's very cool. But I think that's something that I know Greg and I eventually want to be able to bring back. Is like we want to be able to create. Like we don't want to recreate nostalgia. We want to create the stuff people will one day be nostalgic about. Like
it's funny you mentioned that. I'm sure everybody in this chat room, all three of us, at least know somebody that feel they peaked in high school and want to relive those glory days. Me personally, I had a great time in high school. I don't ever want to relive it, but I'm very, very fond of that era, and I feel very fortunate to have those experiences. And the things that made it so cool is I wasn't remembering times prior to that. Like I heard an American comedian, dead now, Mitch Hedberg. He made the joke that in an interview, Greg already knows where I'm going, but he says, in an interview, I was asked, where do you see yourself 5 years from now? And he says, celebrating the 5-year anniversary of you asking me this question. And like you said, we don't want to keep on like drumming up, trying to remake nostalgia. If you soak yourself up in nostalgia all the time, it's like getting used to a drug or a sweet. You don't appreciate it anymore. It becomes the norm. It's not nostalgia anymore. So the only other solution is hold back on those things, indulge in them when you want. This is why I don't sing Christmas songs unless it's December. And like you said, we've got to make the new stuff now. We got to make what was fun, what was cool. And we're not saying, let's think about 10 years ago when we were thinking about 20 years before that. That's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I like that.
Yeah, like for our Mittens campaign is like kind of where we go like full like 90s, and like the second issue we did like way too much. So me and Josh are like, yeah, we're gonna like pull it back and not do like the Nintendo 64 prints because we had enough.
Right.
Like, I would love to do like Ocarina of Time or like Mario Kart or something.
I still think we can eventually do those, but like that's something that I talk a lot about. Like when it comes to marketing, like to marketing anything, you cannot market something that is entirely new. That is why most independent creators of any type, comics, music, film, the reason why most of them suck. Like sorry for anybody who's takes offense to that, but it's like the reason most independent creators suck is they're trying to create something so entirely new that there's nothing for me to relate to. Like if I hear a song and I go, oh, that reminds me of another song, that doesn't mean that song's not good and that the old song is better. It's just a way for me to accept something new without it being so painful. People don't like change. And if something's drastically new, they don't like it. And that's where like nostalgia can play a role. But definitely when you have like those nostalgia porn movies that like Hollywood's putting out where all it is like just over and over again, like, hey, remember Star Wars? Remember Stormtroopers? I remember. Like, it's just one of those things where you could beat it to death and then it's no longer enjoyable. It's no longer nostalgic. You're trying to make it now. Like the fact that they made Beetlejuice 2 or Beetlejuice, I heard it was all right, but it's not a bad movie, but it's like the fact that you need to create that. Like you can't think of any new stories. Like you're out of stories. Like did everybody die? Did the writer strike still go? And like, what's going on? Like
there's definitely a tough balance there. That's for sure. It's very hard to, you want to, especially if you have a pre-existing franchise already established. Yes. Okay. Well, how do we respect and uphold all the things that made it awesome up to this point? But on the flip side, people are going to get tired of nostalgia if you're hitting them with the same things. How do we add to it? Here's something new that you haven't seen before with this, while we still respect the old stuff. So I saw not too long ago The Force Awakens is about to turn 10 years old this December. It doesn't feel that long ago. 2014, it's 2024 now, so that's kind of weird. Now with that said, there was some cool aspects in it. I think it fell short in some ways, and everybody laughs about it. Nobody wants to say their full opinions. Not everybody has the same opinion on it, but it was cool that we got to see the Millennium Falcon. We got to see an older Han Solo with a Chewbacca. But one thing we didn't get to see, unlike Picard in their series that they did, we didn't get to see Luke, Leia, Han. We didn't get to see Lando. We didn't see them all together. Maybe one last ride, for lack of better wording. So it was nostalgia, but it wasn't. It's like they had all of the wrong nostalgia with all of the wrong new stuff. I don't know how else to explain
100%. They basically were told, hey, make sure this stuff gets in the film, but they weren't given any other instructions. And like, okay, well, we had a plot hole over here. What if we just throw nostalgia in that plot hole? It's like, yeah, okay, I guess we could do it one time, but it's like, we got 6 plot holes actually. It's like, okay, I guess Leia can fly now. All right. Like, so like, it's one of those things where like, so I definitely am not going to go down a rabbit hole of hating on those new Star Wars movies.
Kudos for the effort. That's all I got to say.
I know I've just done enough other podcasts bashing the crap out of it because it's just it's one of those things where I can't understand how somebody who went into any form of education on storytelling would put something like that in public and not be embarrassed with themselves.
Well, there's a term I've heard, and I think it really applies here. With the shekels comes the shackles. So the person writing the story wasn't the one in charge. So the person writing the story is being told, make sure you have these elements in it. We need to see this. So suddenly there's creative constraints, which I really like, but then there's a level past that where too many constraints, you've actually kind of stunted the creativity that could potentially come from it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like you can take old stuff like that and make it new again, and like even simple stuff. Like I don't remember if you remember, was a Starsky and Hutch, the one with
Ben Stiller and Owen Wilson.
Yeah, and they do like a little homage to the guys who did it before, but then they did one of those films and then they moved on. Like they didn't make like a whole series of it again, right? So like there's like ideas of making like a remake 25 years later of a film. Like that's totally okay, but like first off, there's tons of great films they haven't done that with yet that could like there's probably silent films they could do this stuff with, you know what I mean, that were good like just storytelling. But it seems like what they did was it's kind of like how we were talking about the 80s about how you end up getting these corporations that are like, wow, I guess we could make money if we combine all of these. Like, let's make a cartoon, sell toys about it and comics about it and all this other stuff. So now we can get as much money from a single IP as possible. And then what happened was someone goes, what if we just did that forever? And it's like, no, like it's clearly not working. Like the MCU was a innovative thing because we had never seen that level quality of cinematic experience with comic book stories, right? Like
and consistency.
Yeah. And so then they make this consistent story. They get all the way to the end and the original MCU minus like one or two films was awesome. And then all of a sudden they're like, what if we just kept like, what if we made TV shows about it and we made up weird stuff about it? We kept diving even deeper into this. And then we're going to make a whole other story arc and try to bring these characters in nobody likes. It's like,
I think I'm going to slightly tangent, but I like to add to that. I have a theory. One of my biggest fears in 2012, not the end of the world 2012, but when Disney bought out Marvel, putting all political opinion aside, that wasn't my concern. And I mean, Marvel, when Disney bought Marvel, they brought in Marvel Now, and they brought in like Lady Jane as Mighty Thor, and they retired Steve Rogers, and putting that all aside, my biggest concern was they're obviously doing this so they can make action figures and incorporate those into the movies real quick, which ended up happening.
Yep.
My concern was what Marvel was doing, which Disney respectfully waited until Endgame was done before they did anything major. They let them play that out because it was working. If it isn't broken, don't fix it. They obviously saw that there. But as soon as Endgame was done, what you mentioned, the TV series and that, I had no problem with these risks, trying something new, like exactly what we're talking about. Disney had a formula, and I've said this on other podcasts. They applied the formula to Marvel, which Marvel wasn't doing. So the best here, I'll say this sarcastically. If Disney made a Punisher movie or TV show now, he'd be shooting Kool-Aid out of the gun. He'd have a cute sidekick, and the evil person probably wouldn't die, would probably be trapped in a crystal or something like that. It sounds very Disney. It does not sound like the Punisher.
It's what happened with Pixar. Pixar was an incredible property that when Steve Jobs negotiated the deal, they were like, listen, you cannot touch them because right now what they are is excellent and you can profit off of it as long as you don't touch them. And they had like a 10-year plan where they were not allowed to interfere at all with any of their inner workings.
That's interesting. I never knew that.
Yeah, and that's why Pixar had Toy Story and was it all the way up to the Incredibles. I don't know if the Incredibles was one of the last ones, but Monsters Inc. All those like iconic Pixar films were all made when they weren't touched by Disney. And then Disney came out and they started making third and fourth and whatever issues of movies beyond what was the original story. Like you've seen Toy Story, right? Have you seen was it the third one that had, they made a fourth one recently, right? It's the fourth one.
Yeah, they made the fourth one. That's the one with the big incinerator.
The third one. No, wait, the incinerator? Or is that the third one?
Is that the third one? I've lost track. It's been a while.
The fourth one's the newest one. I haven't watched it
or something.
I haven't watched the fourth one yet. The whole point was the third one had a perfect conclusion to it.
I've heard that.
The toys get passed on to somebody else.
And it even ends the same way the first one begins, looking up at the clouds, which looks like Andy's wallpaper.
Yep.
Which is like, that's it. The end.
It was
start to beginning.
It was the perfect ending. I was so happy they made that film. And then I heard they were making a fourth, and I'm like, what could they possibly do other than just ruin the franchise? Like, do you know Cowboy Bebop?
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I know of it, but that's the extent of my knowledge.
And the reason you know of it is because it had one series long. It was like 13 episodes or whatever the length of it was. And that was it. And it was so like people wanted more of it. It's like The Sopranos, how people were mad that it just ended. But like people don't understand, like by doing that, people want that. They want to keep watching it. It becomes nostalgic because it ended and you want it again. But
yeah,
the way
it didn't live long enough to become the villain.
Yeah, exactly. They didn't jump the shark, right? We have that term because, you know, that's there. You can eventually jump the shark and make it so that the old story is no longer nostalgic. It's the thing that never died and now it's ruined. And I feel like they don't realize they could profit long-term off of stuff like comics and toys and all that stuff, but they keep the same medium, like the movie, and they keep making more movies. And it's like pivot, like you've already beaten this horse to death. It's turned into glue, and now you're taking the glue and you're gluing bats together to beat another horse. Like the thing's dead. Like just leave it alone.
Just give it the cowboy sunset exit.
Yeah, and
I forget which YouTuber, but he explained how if he's ever watching The Simpsons, for example, if the animation looks very new, he doesn't watch it because it's past that point. Basically, anything past the movie. Where if you watch old Westerns, there's a certain era they stop making them with the exception of once in a while, but they let that era die out.
It's kind of like like Uncle Buck, right? Like
John Candy, fellow Canadian.
One of my favorite movies of all time. And it's this perfect little story that is done. There should never be a second one. I'm glad they never tried to make a second one.
Yes.
That's it. It was a good story and it's done. And it's one of my favorite. I've watched it probably 1,000 times. Right. Mm-hmm. So like,
here's a quarter. I bet you can finish the line.
Yeah. Go downtown and get a rat to gnaw that thing off your face. Good day to you, man.
Great line.
I could quote every part of that movie, and it's because there's only one. And one of the things I've talked about on another podcast is the reason I think that we're no longer creating nostalgic content is we have the Netflix era where you get an entire season of a show released at one time. Like imagine out of nowhere, there's 70 comics for something. Somebody will read all of them and then spoil them for the people who read 3 of them.
Binge it. Yeah.
And then here's the other problem. People don't realize, kind of like, you know, REM sleep, you go to sleep, you store something long term.
Yes.
But like the purpose of it is during that phase of your sleep, you're taking short-term memory, converting it to long-term memory. If you consume 1 billion pieces of content in a single day, you cannot turn all of it to long-term memory. The reason why like shows like Friends or Family Guy when we were younger were like super memorable was we watched it today and then we had to wait a week to watch it again. Mm-hmm. So all week long, we're not only remembering that episode, we're anticipating the next one. And with these new ones, they pump out a bunch of stuff, like a bunch of shows at once. Somebody binge watches all of them. They say they love it. You ask them a year later what happened in there. They have no idea. They don't remember, right? Because it was so quick and now it's done, right? In fact, even when there are shows like that, I prefer to watch them one at a time. Like I'll watch one this weekend, I'll watch another one next weekend, but then it becomes hard because everyone else online wants to make sure they're the one that spoils it. So it's like, it's something that I think that, is definitely valuable with independent creators that they can take advantage of is that it's too hard for us monetarily wise to and capital wise to like accomplish that, to pump out 6 pieces of major content all at once and then, not lose fans because of it. So by having that, even some of our comics, we've had people joke with us, like, hey, that's weird. This isn't Ink 2 or this isn't Mittens 2 or like this isn't the second one of the one I want. Right. And, why are you working on another comic? And so it's definitely something that I think that we can take advantage of as independent creators that is totally destroyed. And I think like how you're creating stuff out of gaming, like you've kind of restricted your rules to the universe. And that's where like one last thing on the Star Wars thing, like when they decided that you could turn a ship into hyperspace and then blow up a giant ship, you've just like, why wouldn't you have done that?
Why do we need a Death Star if you can just light speed a ship through a planet?
Yeah, like that exactly. So like they completely
broke the lore.
destroyed the rules of their universe in an instant, and it's like by having independent creators that are the sole like source of the ideas as opposed to 1,000. That's why like I don't know if you follow any YouTubers, but I follow a bunch, and you know, there's some that are comedic and they write most of their own works. Maybe they work with like a friend or a comedian to write the rest of their stuff. But then you get somebody on, you know, that's a mainstream comedian, and they get like 1,000 writers writing stuff for them. Right. That's why like stand-up comedy is so much better than like late night comedy. Like stand-up comedians write their own jokes. So they like build on it and they build on it, they build on it. But then you get like a late night show and they got 26 joke writers and they have to have a sign to remind people it's funny. You know, it's like that's really the reason. And I think that a lot of films have gone that route where they're like, okay, these are the rules. We got to make sure we touch these 6 nostalgic points. We got to make sure to create this type of character so we can create a toy off of it later. And they're like checking the box instead of
It's a
just
safe profit as opposed to
like,
taking risks and making something new.
Or just creating a good story. Like I think story is the last part on their list. They're like, all right, here's the stuff we need to touch. Let's figure out how to string a rope through all of them and then pull it tight and see if it turns into a story. And if not, you know, at least we can make money off of the, you know, the toys we sell later. It's like that for the people that are nostalgic about it. Like that's the crazy part. It's like, so that's why I love how you broke that down. Like with the gaming, it's like by having this mapped out progression of story, and not only that, just D&D in general, you've already created bounds to your universe. Like you already have rules that can't be broken because they're part of the universe. Like Greg and I, for our comic issues, like we've created so many rules that we actually have to keep them in a database to make sure we don't forget them. But because of that, our stories will have these little hidden, you know, Easter eggs, which people love. Like you mentioned, those little sticky notes with like, these people are here on purpose. Like they're not supposed to be there. They don't seem like it, but it's actually on purpose because 8 issues from now, you're going to find out why they were there. And it's like, I love that stuff. Like we have.
Well, I was just going to say, side note, ever since I reviewed an issue of Mittens for you guys, to this day, at random, I'll say to myself, pug noises, just because it makes me chuckle. Like to this day, I just go pug noises, just because it's just so funny. Instead of you guys trying to write phonetically what a pug noise sound would sound like, because you can't really. You just pug noises. I do that all the time now. I say it all the time.
I acted it out to Josh, like on like StreamYard, like in a meeting, and I'm like, you know, because I used to have 2 pugs, which are those pugs that are in the story. So I was like, it's like, and I'm like, how do you
spell that?
So he's like, we're gonna just write pug noises. I was like, that's amazing.
I think it's funny too because that's almost. I think another thing that you can play off nostalgia is the jesting of nostalgia, as opposed to just straight up dumping it into your story. Like for example, all the old comics where they're like swing, and it's like they write out the sound. And you're like, man, somebody's job was just to figure out the mnemonic, like that. They had to say it 1,000 times, make the sound, and then try to figure out what to write out to make your brain read that and go, that sounds like a sword, right? Like, so it's
Spider-Man's whip or the vamp of Nightcrawler or the schnit of Wolverine's claws.
Exactly. And it's like somebody had to write all those. And that's why I think it's funny that you remember the pug noises, because it is like, it's kind of a jest.
Like the opposite. We're rejecting that. We're just going to put pug noises.
And it's funny because like all of our comics have those mnemonic sounds. Like they'll have the bam, explosions, kabloom, all those. And it's just funny to think about. Yeah, just like pug noises.
my children, they if they're ever like grunting or squawking or whining, and don't get me wrong, they don't do that all the time, but I have a rule in my house: if you can't spell it, you're not allowed to make the sound. They'll like whine or something, like, okay, you know what, we're gonna have supper, we got time to clean up. They'll like grunt. I'll be like, how do you spell that? And they can't. So all right, let's continue cleaning up, and away we go.
That's so funny. My dad used to bust on my uncle because he would pull up these random facts like that he actually knew the answer to, and he'd always be like, "Yeah, but can you spell it?"
I like that.
Like, yeah, this guy did it. It's like, yeah, but can you spell it?
This is the last question. So, how do gaming elements enrich your characters and plots?
Well, it's very interesting. If let's go well, there's two different routes. So the first one is tabletop RPG. If you make a character, they're going to have some really cool stuff they can do, and usually it's a traditional haymaker, if you will. That's the big thing they can do, not as often. If I were to compare it to boxing or pugilism, you can jab all day, you can't throw the big punch all the time. So if you're making a character in D&D, usually the big punches, you can only use it once or twice, or it's limited. So you got to be strategic when you're going to bust those things out. Where if you have some really cool go-to, warlocks, for example, in D&D, they have the traditional Eldritch Blast, which is basically you can jab all day. It reminds me a lot of the pugilist Emmanuel Augustus. He was actually referred to as a drunken boxer because everything he did was very unorthodox. So if you ever look up on YouTube, there's a channel called The Modern Martial Artist, and he breaks down Emmanuel Augustus. It's just mind baffling. But anyways, going back, I'm a couple of tangents there. Warlocks, I'm going to be relying on Eldritch Blast all the time, but if I could cast, say, Fireball or something really big, it's going to take away from the character. In comics, for my characters, the really big hits, you have to remember this whole story takes place over 3 issues, but it's one night. So they can't run forever. They can't do all these things forever. I would expect going into issue 2 and especially issue 3 of this book, you'll see these guys in scenarios where they're maybe not they're at their best because they're a little tuckered. And suddenly it's more, I'm not going to go as far as saying desperation per se, but suddenly people sober up and, okay, how do we just manage to stay alive here? So in regards to gaming elements, enriching the characters, I know I've already used the phrase creative constraints. I'll give a critique of Captain Marvel. There was no room for her to grow, with the exception of a chip on the back of her head that needed to be broken. She has limitless powers. If you contrasted that to Tony Stark's first armor in the first movie, he keeps on getting better. Eventually it's nanotech, but that's like a dozen versions of Iron Man later. Where do you go with Captain Marvel? Nowhere.
It's crazy too, because they wanted to have Captain Marvel replace Tony as the main carrier of the story.
And Disney Marvel did that in the comics as well with the second Civil War. That was the exact same thing. They kept on trying to force that to happen, like you're saying there, instead of just.
By the way, I found out that Kevin Feige apparently had control of both the comics and the films. And so what he did was Disney basically would say, we want something to happen. He would then create comics to test if it would work before they made the films. That's why a lot of those stories.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And I didn't know that either, that he had basically full creative control over it. And what makes that even more interesting is that very recently, kind of the stuff that we were talking about, how like it's gone down this rabbit hole of real quick. It's gone down this rabbit hole of not having good stuff. And apparently Kevin Feige is on a firing spree, removing all of the people who have implemented.
I've heard of that.
Implemented like terrible, like, let's put in politics for no reason into our films.
Yeah, and regardless of the politics, it isn't what the politics were, but the fact that they try to make it political messages.
Yeah, like it's the thing that they don't understand is that back in the day, like the Uncle Buck, great example, right? That just taught family values, but it didn't shove it down your throat. Like it wasn't like
it reflected it. It didn't say you should be doing this with your kids or you should be doing that with your kids.
It made you think about it. Like, this is how he did it. This is how they did it. There's somewhere in the middle that's probably a good way. And that's what's so funny. Is very often they showed both sides like this, and then they're like, this is what you should learn from it, as well as accept people for all of these things, right? Like it's
yes, kind of like, that's a good point. I never thought of that. That's a good point.
They don't make, I don't even know what to call those types of movies because they don't make them anymore. But like that was a whole thing in like the 70s and 80s and early 90s. And then they just kind of stopped making those types of films.
I think if I had to give it a title, I'd call it apolitical. Apolitical messages. They weren't political. They were like,
they were just moral stories.
Reflected the reality as opposed to make sure you think this when I'm done.
Yeah, and they were like reflections on morality as more so than they were about like active, like specific political things. Where you're like, okay, I know that you're this person is this person, and you're just making this a giant metaphor. So I have to think about. And the thing that's interesting too, and I think the reason why I love that you tied your games into the comic stories is that you're not taking so. This has been talked about before, like X-Men, the original X-Men. You had, what was it, MLK and Malcolm X was kind of the idea.
Magneto and Xavier, yeah.
And the whole idea is like it didn't need to go into great depth about that. It was just showing you examples of how people might think and how they might act, but then also just telling a really good story. Like the main part was the story.
And to add to your point there with the first Secret Wars, all of the people that felt they were good were put in one spot, and all the people that were just dicks, essentially all the villains, were put in one spot. Well, amongst all the heroes was Magneto, because he thinks he's a good guy. So it wasn't necessarily good guys versus bad guys. It was about, how do you get what you want? Well, being a decent person is, Magneto feels he's right. Can Xavier say, you know what, we have a better option here. We don't have to fight to get what we want. And suddenly it's not political beliefs, but just contrasting, where's our common ground? Where's the overlaps? We both want mutants to be safe. And I really like that, especially in Secret Wars when Magneto was fought with the good guys.
Which by the way that they did it was mutants, right? It was something that was a fictional thing to show the difference between people, right? Where now they'll like, I will go into great depth, but I know Supergirl had a ridiculous scene where they basically brought something directly political now into the story, completely unrelated to like the actual story, just to like bring up a topic that we're talking about, where like the X-Men did it through like 3 layers deep. And like, that's the thing. It's like, if you want to tell a story, if you want to impact somebody, that's why parables are so great. Parables are short stories that express a moral belief. But the main thing is the story. We remember the story. If I don't remember the story, I'm not going to remember the moral you were even trying to teach me. In fact, I will probably resent both the story and the moral you were trying to teach me. So it's definitely interesting that, like I said, Kevin Feige is now going through and kind of removing a lot of that from the organization, because we
tried it. It's not working.
And they tried it long enough that we definitely know it's not working.
Yeah, it's more than just one case study.
Yeah.
It's funny. You mentioned Uncle Buck. When I was a kid and I watched Uncle Buck, there's the scene where he's so desperate to get to the track and he's going to take those 2 kids with him. And he looks at, I think he looks in the mirror, but he actually just trying not to cry. And he realizes, if I do this, I'm a piece of shit. Pardon my language.
Yeah.
But when I was a kid, I didn't understand it, but that it had a very big impact on me. So after watching it a couple more times as I grew up, oh, he's gambling. Well, there's a time and a place for that. And the track, especially, is not a place for kids. He didn't want the kids to see him as the person he was, and he wanted the kids to still look up to him. So suddenly he's motivated to, maybe I should do better. And nobody's saying whether or not gambling is bad. They're just saying there's a time. It's just like there's limits to voting and drinking alcohol and getting out. There's a time and a place and an age where you should be doing these things. Taking your kids to the track is a no-no, regardless of your political stance.
I just realized too, like it was so 2 things. First one was like that kids won't see what the thing is, but you remembered it, and as an adult you actually get the lesson. So first off, that makes it a timeless film, is that anyone of any generation can enjoy this film. Especially when you're like, like for example, every time I'm wishing somebody happy birthday, I always send a little gif of him going happy birthday with the giant ass pancakes. You should have seen the French toast. I couldn't even get it through the door. Right. Like, so like, I love like that's memorable. But yeah, like I remember as a kid just enjoying it. It was a funny film. And as an adult watching it, just going like, damn, like those are some powerful lessons. And like you just said,
very
it's like,
deep.
Knowing not to go to the track with the kids and what that really would have meant. Like, and now that there's two things about that. The first one is that in movies today, what'll happen is they'll have that same exact scene, but then they'll tell you exactly what he's thinking out loud. He's like, man,
bad thing is bad.
he'll be like, yeah, if I go to the track, then the kids are going to watch me gamble, and I don't want the kids to gamble. It's like, dude, like we can get that. We're not stupid. Like let us
show, don't tell.
Yeah, and so it's one of those things too. Like they say that in books too. Like you shouldn't describe or write something that that makes the audience feel like they couldn't conclude that themselves. Like you should write it to the level of the audience, not like not spell it out for them.
I've said it as a joke. If the person explaining something, if it feels natural for them to look into the camera and wink, then you know you're saying too much.
Yeah,
you guys got it right. You know we're good. I said the thing, so you know what I want you to think. Right, we're good.
Deadpool hilarious too, like because Deadpool will do that. Where like when they do something where like they point something out like that, they'll look at the camera because that is the joke. It's like yeah, that was over the top. We know. But like the other part of that too is actually like the shame. It was like that's like the whole thing where like you can't shame people, and it's like no, like shame is a powerful driver for good morals, and it's like
yes.
So, and I think that that's something that a lot of the old movies had. And that's why I was going to say earlier, you said they were like apolitical. I would say that the word political doesn't even evolve around those films. They're more like dramatic family stories. Like they're
I think you're right. That's a good way of putting it.
It has comedy and sadness and action, and it has everything. And you know what I mean? Like there's a scene where like he sees like almost like a horror thriller where he's there because the kid took the niece out, and it's Bug. Yeah, it's like ooh, a lot like it's like I like to keep my hatchet so sharp you could shave with it. In fact I've been known to chop the wings off of a gnat. Oh, that's
sharp enough to circumcise a gnat.
Yeah, circumcise a gnat. That's what it was. And he goes, ooh, bug, gnat. Oh, you see a correlation.
A little off the kneecap.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of a tune-up? Have you ever heard of a ritual killing?
Yeah, was it gnaw on my niece's neck in public like that again? You'll be one.
I love. Oh man, yeah. The movies like that. Like you said, they're not trying to make the movie with the intention of we're going to milk this into the minimum of a trilogy. We're just going to make a good film and enjoy it and move on. And Uncle Buck, one of my favorite scenes. I've already mentioned the one where he's going to the track, but another one, and I think this was being a straight man. I thought this was a good message in Uncle Buck when Auntie Jackie from Roseanne comes over and tries to hit on Buck, and she's trying to dance with him, and Buck is like mostly oblivious to it. They end up headbutting each other, and I think it's very important for men to see you like get along with the opposite sex, of course, but don't treat it like this. I need to give the attention to every person. I like men and women alike, of course. They need to. I'm like okay. Just because somebody's nice to me doesn't mean I have to match that and then some. You be nice back, but well, this person likes me or asks me out on a date, I'm not obligated to say yes. And coming from a Canadian perspective, like there's a whole manners dynamic. If I say no, am I a bad person? No, well, that's not true. I'm just not interested. I'll give you another example. A movie that's not very popular, many people don't like. M. Night Shyamalan's The Village. In M. Night Shyamalan's The Village, there's one scene where this girl likes Joaquin Phoenix, and she professes everything how she feels about him, thinking, well, we're going to be a couple now. And it doesn't even show his reply. It just cuts to the next scene where she's in tears on her mother's lap crying. And I'm thinking, was he bad for doing that? Well, no, she just had her hopes up, and that's not his fault, kind of thing. And I really liked that as a message of you can't make everybody happy, but it doesn't say in the story, you don't need to make everybody happy. It shows, it doesn't tell. And you gather, like you put it as parables, all these little things, these scenes are supposed to do that as opposed to beat you over the head with it.
Yeah. I was going to say, aside from like Uncle Buck, I think the last type of film was Step Brothers that had that type of storytelling where it's like, it's clearly a comedy, but there's also a lot of drama. There's a lot of life lessons, all that stuff. And it's like, like politically, it's apolitical. Like there's no politics at all in it. It's normally about family values and how it shows like the difference between types of families and all that stuff, but how families are still important regardless. And I definitely think that that a movie like that you could quote from beginning to end is so rare now. Like, I can't think of a single movie in the last 10 years that I could quote from beginning to end. Not one, but I could still quote from beginning to end. Liar, Liar, Uncle Buck, a bunch of movies like that I watched like a million times and could not keep, I could still watch them and still enjoy them. And it's like, that's so rare now. And I think it's because they're trying to be nostalgic. So now they're all just kind of blending into each other. And that's definitely a big miscalculation in like their long-term success. They're just trying to cash in on that old cow. And it's like that cow already had 3 kids. Why not work on one of the kids and stop?
Yeah. Well, it's really tough. I mean, if I really wanted to make money from a formula perspective, if we milk out this nostalgia, we'll at least make X amount of money in profit, or we could try something new. Really good example. I already mentioned M. Night Shyamalan. He was great with his Sixth Sense. He was great with Signs, regardless of its plot holes. It delivered. It hit. When you watch it for the first time, you buy right into it, despite its plot holes. Like the way he delivered it, he did a good job. The Village wasn't that great, but eventually he became such a powerhouse that they're like, here, do The Last Airbender. Here, try this. The only movie I liked from him after The Village was Split was good. I got to give you credit for that. Yeah, Split was good. But the one I want to mention is, I believe it came out just before, was The Visit. And the reason The Visit was so good, in my opinion, is because he was not sponsored by anybody. It was on his own dime. And I already used the phrase, with the shekels comes the shackles. This was his own thing. There's no nostalgia. There's no nothing. Although you could say it's the trope of found footage, which is true, everything else about it, I had no idea where the hell this movie was going. And it had me the whole time. I've only watched it once in theater, and I can remember almost every scene vividly. Like, it really hits with me. For a horror movie, it's something different, and it's like a home run, in my opinion.
Nice. That's funny. One last thing, because we want to wrap this up, but that just actually made me think of the shekels and shackles again. Was I was listening to something recently. Have you watched the latest Deadpool?
I have, yes.
Okay, and Greg, I'm pretty sure you saw it already, right?
I saw it probably
immediately. Yeah, So it just made me think of something, because I saw a video. So spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, because it's been like a month now, right? But basically, when Henry Cavill is seen in it, right? Like the
Calverine, yes,
yeah, the Calverine, right? Apparently, there was an entire fight scene with him that they just removed from the film.
Interesting.
And the reason why, ironically, was his like politics kind of thing. Like, that's the whole reason why they removed it. But supposedly it was just for budget cuts, but they already filmed it, so it made no sense. And so right now, what's it called? Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds are basically fighting with Disney Marvel to get those scenes put, because they weren't even going to put them in like the Blu-ray extras or anything like that. Like, they were just getting rid of them entirely, so no one could ever see them. So right now, obviously, I think Henry Cavill is like suing, because part of his deal was that he gets that fight scene, right?
Interesting.
He didn't want to be a part of it unless he can get the full fight scene. So there's supposed to be this whole fight scene with him, and they just eliminated it. And
I have a tinfoil hat theory on that. In Deadpool 2, they had Deadpool, then they had like the Christmas special. I have a theory that a year from now they'll re-release Deadpool 3 with all of these deleted scenes.
If they do that, that would be interesting, because it could be
smart marketing, but
it would be brilliant marketing. But yeah, because at least from what it sounded like, it appeared to be genuine frustration that that they were completely cut from it. But yeah, it'd be cool if they just had like almost like an ash can equivalent of a comic, if they just had a micro scene, like a 14-minute fight scene between Henry Cavill as the Calverine and Deadpool. Like, that would be hilarious.
Watch it show up in the Avengers movie or something. They'll tie it in somehow.
In the background,
That'd be cool.
They're like the Avengers are going like this, and in the background you just see Deadpool getting tossed around, and you're like, what's going on? And then
claws.
Yeah. So, but I thought about that because the shackles essentially, it's like, yeah, they got paid, and the directors basically get to do what they want and potentially destroy that. But sometimes, like, yeah, if you get enough of your own shackles, eventually you can take off at least one of the cuffs. So it's definitely interesting. Like that was definitely the fact that Marvel let that happen, like the movie happen, is awesome. Like that, like it's like I hope that was like
for a Disney film. Kudos.
Oh yeah. So I'm definitely excited. But anyways, to not keep you any longer. It's awesome having you. It was great hearing the 80s nostalgia, great learning about your gameplay and how it combined with your storytelling and comics. So one last thing, just want to confirm, where's my mouse over here? This is your current Kickstarter. They're not current, but soon to be running. Yep, the pre-launch page, right?
Yes.
And,
so this Madcaps issue 2, we're going to be launching in the new year. I will tease one thing. I have my entire team set up, including cover artists. Victor Medina is doing the interiors this time. Dan Kemp is coloring everything, who's done over 100 issues of Spawn. I've got Jay Sloan and various others doing covers rather. I can't say who yet, but I've got one cover coming out with an individual who's been with Image since pretty much the start, since '92. And the only other hint I'll say for talent, it is related to Deadpool. And no, it is not Rob Liefeld, but it's
Wait, what?
it's not Liefeld, but it is an Image veteran, and it is somebody who he's got his fingerprints over a lot of stuff. It's going to be awesome when I can finally announce it. If you want to know first, the minute this thing launches, you just sign up on this pre-launch page. Issue 2 of 3. Stakes are going to be raised. There's this one is themed on tension and enemy territory, and by the end of this issue, it's a big setup for issue 3, and I'm just going to say fireworks. That's all I'm going to say. It's going to be real good.
Awesome. And other than this Kickstarter, where can people find you?
Oh, and the last thing I'll say is you can buy issue 1 through this Kickstarter to be. You can find me on Facebook as DM Ray, DM meaning Dungeon Master. You can find my Facebook page, The Madcaps, on Facebook as well. You can find me through what we call Twixter, now that it's X. And you can also find me on Instagram. Instagram I use a lot, and Facebook too. Twixter I'm going to start ramping up.
I want to call it that.
What's that?
I'm going to call it that now.
Twixter. It's like the candy bar.
I've heard Twix. I've heard Twix because
that's
Twix,
a good
the candy bar.
Though. I don't like that.
Us Canadians call it chocolate bars, but yeah, candy bar. And you can also, I believe that's everything on social media. I'm going to be putting more things on YouTube. We're going to have our physical prints of issue 1 coming out later this week. Phil Russert's going to share some footage of it because he'll get a hold of it first. He's doing all the fulfilling, and this is going to come real quick. And for a first-time comic creator, my first issue, I'm just really excited to get this out of my system. Be it you're a writer, an artist, whatever it is you like to express, and it's just really good to get this expression out of me, if that makes sense. So issue 2 is coming quick. Please sign up. And number 3, you're definitely going to enjoy as well.
Cool.
Sounds good.
Well, thanks for coming.
Fellas, Greg, it's nice to finally see you face to face. I messed up one time with a time zone reason. We were supposed to meet up before. I am going to be looking to play some D&D related to a prequel to issue 2. I will keep you guys in mind. I'll give you more details. If you want to play along, it'll be a one-shot, so maybe it'll be less than 3 hours. I'm going to try and keep it within 2.5, but life is going to be good.
Cool.
Awesome.
All right. Yeah.
Cool.
So go follow that Kickstarter. The link will be in the description, as it would be live this Wednesday. So as you're watching this on YouTube, all the millions and millions of people that watched us, go follow that.